Hello again, everyone. Terry Earthwind here, along with my partner and love of my life, Vettrus-Nichols, and our very special guest, Chelle Shapiro. We'll get to her in just a moment. And the incomparable Jenny Landgren and John Chappelear is in the house. And this is all about People Come First, the book, live, with special guest, Chelle Shapiro. Chelle, we're just lovely to have you here. I am personally a fan, so this is very cool for me. And welcome.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Linda, John, Jenny, for having me with you today. I'm so excited to talk about the need to belong and how that relates to People Come First. So, yeah, where should we dive in from? What do you want to talk about first?
Well, Linda, what do you think?
Whoa, yeah. That need to belong for sure hits hard in grade school when you're all lined up and they're picking teams and nobody picks you, if that's something that's happened in your life. I remember some of that. And Morag Barrett and her Sky team just wrote a book, You, Me, We, and that's about CEOs, even like a very low percentage, having a best friend at work. And so that's another place, need to belong. That's super important. You spend so much time at an office, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
How about you, Terry? Whatever happened in your life where you didn't get that need met?
Well, in a couple of different places in the Navy, late last century, I love saying that. It's just cool. There was a couple of places late last century where the office was basically all officers and I was enlisted. So I was that enlisted guy. And when the area admiral came in and he spent more time with me than he did with the officers, they started thinking, maybe this guy should be in the circle, and things changed.
Nice.
But it took an admiral to come over and ask me what I thought about the area of recruiting where we were at, and not ask them at all. I thought was hilarious, but he was at least smart enough to know the person that's on the street has the best knowledge. So yeah, that was a couple of different times, After the Navy, there was a couple of different times where my pedigree on a sheepskin didn't match the Harvard kids that were in the class. And that was a little difficult group to break into. So I made myself a lot better golfer than they did, and I started taking their money. So, there's ways to get around it.
Right? How about you, Jenny? Is there a time where you just had that need to belong?
Oh, definitely. As always, going into these conversations, there's a lot coming to mind around the topic. And when I think about, my connection with Chelle and things are coming in, and now that we're all here, what I remember is there was a time, there were 10 years of my life where I was being, in a very toxic relationship, and I was taught and trained to believe that I was not worthy to belong. And I remember the time of healing that came after that it felt so strange to me that people would listen, that people would be respectful, that people wanted my opinion and my thought of view. And I remember, belonging being, so new to me that it felt uncomfortable. And I felt selfish for wanting that for myself. And the more I healed, I started to recognize that that's the natural flow of things. We are born to connect. We're wired that way to be seen and to be known and to be loved. And it's been such a beautiful process to accept myself first so that I can also, recognize that I am worthy of that belonging. And that's what's coming in for me right now, and looking forward to this conversation.
Wow, that is seriously powerful. How about you, John?
Well, I've had a chance to think about it, and I changed my mind. So the thing for me has always been is sort of process from hubris to humility. And for me, that was a very painful transition because when I was, sort of locked in this armor of hubris, I didn't need any connections. I didn't need anything like that. I could just, lay out the marching orders for everybody else and just keep on moving. The idea, like you said earlier, of a CEO having a best friend at work, I'm still not sure that's ever going to really connect too well, but you can have somebody that you trust on a deep level at work. And eventually, as I began to move from sort of hubris to humility, the process of sort of cracking through that hard shell of it's all about me into more about the idea that, maybe there is a value to this connection racket, kind of thing. And the idea that, that really and truly, I remember reading this years ago, and I wish if you asked me to give you a bibliography on this, I can't do it, but I remember that it was over 80% of all the enjoyable events in our lives happen when we're connected to someone else. It's not that this happens while we're all by ourselves. It's this sense of joy and connection only comes when we're joyful and connected. And so this was always one of my issues with my clients, is that they want engagement in their employees and engagement in their leadership and workers. And I say, well, what's the difference between a couple and an engaged couple? And the difference is in emotion. They're emotionally connected to each other. If you want engagement, then you have to add emotion. You have to be willing to sort of allow us to feel and connect on a heart basis, not just on an intellectual basis. And as people have been able to do that, just like with me, I've been able to sort of move from this big shot into being a recovering big shot. So I enjoy being in recovery. So thank you for letting me share. And it's nice to see you, Chelle.
That's awesome, John. Thank you. And welcome, Chelle. This is so great. And this is such a great topic for you. So I'm going to give you the floor.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to hear everybody's perspectives on what it means to them to belong and that need. And I'm thinking about it from a few different perspectives right now after hearing you all. The first thing that's coming up, Linda, you mentioned about childhood and needing to fit in on the kickball field or being picked last for a team. And I can certainly relate to that. As I was growing up, we changed classes every year. And I know that sounds like a normal thing to do possibly, but like we didn't stick with the same kids. There were a lot of people in the town, in the educational system. And so I was with 30 or so new classmates every single year. And that meant that I needed to make a new group of friends. Who's going to be my best friend this year? Who am I going to be buddy with? Who am I going to who's going to be like my nemesis in the class, or like someone that I'm going to butt heads with? Because, like I'm not going to get along with everybody. But that was a little bit of a struggle for me to have to make a new core set of friends that every single school year, because I did want to belong and I did want to build relationships and like be able to keep those friendships going even after year to year. And I found that really hard to do because you're inundated with this new group of kids, this new circle of friends and people that you're supposed to connect with. Well, now what happens to little Susie over there that like I was best friends with her last year, but now I don't have time because I'm making all these new connections and establishing things over here. And I kind of always felt like I was leaving people by the wayside. And I didn't want that. So that for me was a really big struggle to make sure that they knew that they still belonged and had a place with me, but also to make sure that I still had a place and felt connected to them. As over time, as I got older, I'm also thinking about it as like, this goes back to something I talked about in my book about feeling like I didn't want to be the smartest person in the room, but people often thought, or I thought that they thought that I was the smartest person in the room. And so oftentimes when I was just curious or wanting to connect with people, I'd raise my hand, and even the teacher at times. And this happened over a few different years. It wasn't just one teacher in particular where they would be like, Michelle, put your hand down, give somebody else a chance. You don't always need to be the one to chime in with the answer. And I didn't always know the answer. I just wanted to perpetuate the conversation and be part of it. Like that need to belong. Like I was part of a bigger thing than myself. And I always felt misunderstood in that people couldn't understand where I was coming from and that need. So I'm thinking of that in my later childhood with the need to belong. And then on to adulthood or early adulthood. Having made different groups of friends over every single year, I felt like I could insert myself in my teen years and early 20s. I could insert myself and fit in with any group, any clique. I was athletic, but I was brainy. I was musical. I was creative and artsy. Like I could fit in a whole bunch of different areas. And so that need to belong showed up because I didn't know what my true place was or who my true friends were, because I fit in or could easily mold myself to be in certain areas. And on the one hand, that's great. I can have this metamorphosis and change into different parts of myself or show different parts of myself. Not that I'm masking or that I'm not completely myself in each one of those situations, but that I have so many different sides of me that different groups get to see. But then that need to belong always came back up of like, is there ever going to be a time and space where I can just be myself completely and show all those facets of myself and not have to segregate it into different compartments and groups? And so that has carried over into my now life and world, because I have found that. And it feels really good when I don't have to go searching for something that just isn't a complete version of me. I've found that, and it doesn't matter if everybody likes me. It doesn't matter if I fit in everywhere. I know where I fit in. And that feels so good. So approaching it from every stage of my life, I can really see how that developmentally has changed me. And I know you guys can relate to that so much.
Absolutely.
That was powerful.
Yeah, thank you.
That was powerful. Very cool. Yeah, I get it. Thinking back, I went to 7 high schools. In 4 years of high school, I went to 7 different 5 different schools and 1 school twice. Started out in 1 school and graduated from there at the end, which was my hometown for the most part. And everybody was new every time because my dad was in construction, and the company sent him 500 miles away, then we moved, and that was just the way it is. The perception that I was an outsider or anything like that never entered my mind. And I credit my parents for that, because they never used those words. They never used words that were poor. They never used, those people. They didn't use the rhetoric of separation. And I think that helped to build my base of who I am today, because I don't likewise have those issues, and I've never spoken them in my house, and therefore my daughter doesn't have them too. So a lot of what's going on in our world and the people that we love and trust can certainly help us create or break down filters, which I think is important. Linda?
Yeah, I agree. I lived in the suburbs in Southwest Minneapolis in Minnesota, and it was during the time of Martin Luther King. And so I just had such a heart for that movement that he led, and I just didn't encounter, any prejudice myself. And I always had a heart for what was wrong in the world, if you will. And so I also didn't have any built up hatred. So when there was the all city patrol picnic, I got off my school bus, and other kids were getting off theirs, and it was at the time where they weren't busing and mixing all the kids from all the areas with the inner city kids. So that was a huge separation that I wasn't really all that aware of. And so a couple of Black girls got off the bus, and I smiled at them, just being friendly. And I got my hair grabbed, I got pulled back, I got dragged down, I got thrown to the ground. It's just like, I was just like, what? Like, what was that? And then they walked away, and I'm like, okay. And I just walked away. Then when I was home, I was like, why did they do that? I don't understand. And my mom goes, maybe they were jealous. And I'm like, of what? So that was the day that my eyes, like 6th grade, really opened. Like, there's a bigger world, and people have lived through like major injustice, and they, you know, they might have like anger and resentment and want to take it out on others or whatever. And it didn't change my heart at all. I wasn't bitter or anything. So yeah, that was like a huge eye opener for me. And at that moment, I felt like I didn't belong. So, and then I take that minuscule little thing and then throw that into like someone's life who, you know, like whites are treating poorly or whatever, and shoo, you know, can't begin to imagine. And that's why it's really important to listen to our friends who are raised in different ways or are coming from different cultures, or, you know, have been through their own prejudices, and or people have been prejudiced against them. And there's also a reverse, you know, people who are, say, white could move to another country and they are the minority, and then they do get a chance to feel what that really feels like. Or there's just a different religion. Obviously the Jews have gone through hell. So yeah, we don't naturally tap into or see our own prejudices, and we also don't usually see our own privilege and really understand our privilege. So I feel that that's a seriously important conversation to always have, you know, out there on the table and open for exchange, because we all do and say things that are going to be hurtful for another person without even realizing it. Does that make sense?
You know, at this point, I would like to get, you know, the four of us, say Jenny, are Americans. So there's an American take on this. I'd like Jenny to maybe give us a European and or a Swedish take on belonging and those types of things. Did you see that in school?
I did not as much. What I would like to lift here is that I really do appreciate the Swedish mentality around, you know, everything in our town is ours. There is a lot of activity. There's a lot of opportunities for children, for example, in our town to play and have a good time that is for everyone. And what happens is that we are taught that this is ours. And this means that I get to care for it. This town and this, even my town is built not, you know, on nature. I feel a little bit of echo. Thank you. My town is built into nature. So there's a lot of streams and opportunities to walk and have the woods nearby, and I am grown up being taught that this is mine and I get to care for it, and being included that way. And I mean, I'm still only sharing from my perspective, but looking at what's going on in the world, I do appreciate that this is something that I know is available for everyone here, are swimming in the place that we go swimming in, and the just the activities that are organized by our municipality is for everyone. And I mean, it is what's coming up for me. Thank you for the question, Terry.
You bet. And John, you're a DC kid, and that's, there's neighborhoods around there. How did you see that type of situation as a child?
Well, it's interesting because my father was a equal opportunity bigot. So it didn't seem to matter who you were, or what your religion was, or what your race or creed or color was. He just didn't like you. So I had a wonderful opportunity to learn how to be a good citizen by just deciding to do the opposite of whatever he decided that was right. So it was, you can learn from anyone, even people who are dramatically or dynamically different than you. It was interesting because as a kid, of course, you listen to what's going on in your family and you think, well, this has got to be right because it's always that way. And it just got to a point with me that it seemed to be the sense of exclusion was what he was attempting to do, was to sort of be this unique island unto himself. Whereas, we never did any family reunions or meet the cousins or anything like that. So it wasn't until I was an adult that I drove around, because the Chappelear family landed from France about 20 miles south of Washington, D.C. So we weren't much of travelers once we got to the New World. But growing up in DC was really wonderful. I mean, it was freedom because you were in a city that in those days, I think my mother would check on me 2 or 3 times a day just to make sure I was still in the same hemisphere. But, there wasn't a whole lot of parents checking on kids. I mean, we used to ride the streetcar or jump on the back of a streetcar and ride up to the Capitol and have fun. We would roller skate in the basement of the Capitol and get chased out by the Capitol Police. But, it was just fun as a kid, swim in the fountain in front of Union Station and things that other kids don't get a chance to do. And the thing about DC, very much like Jenny was talking about, DC was sort of ours. It's a unique municipality within the country. There aren't any other federal districts in the United States that I know of. And when I was a kid, the citizens of Washington couldn't even vote for president. It wasn't considered a votable area. If you lived there, you just lived there. It wasn't until later that those kinds of senses of inclusion and connection. This is one of the issues that DC has still, which is it wants to be included in the concept of statehood. And it's just still not being allowed to be a part of that. It's sort of conditional acceptance. And this is one of the reasons I think that there is still a sense of animosity between the DC government and the federal government, because it's not a sense of connection and inclusion. It's a sense of, we'll let you know when you can do things or not do things, kind of thing. So for me, it was a good childhood growing up. It was a good life. It was good life lessons to learn how not to behave. That did take a lot of failure and then success to sort of learn, no, that's not right. That doesn't seem right. And to trust my own sense that, that this isn't the way I think. Why would I want to do things like that? Why would I want to only really like the people that I know closely? Otherwise, if it's just a generalization of a group or people, that's okay. I just stay away from them. And the more that I opened myself to the connection with other people, the more enjoyment I got out of my life. So it was just, it was a fun childhood. I don't remember much about having exclusion senses as a kid around other kids until I was maybe in high school, when it was a little more peer pressure-ish. But no, it was growing up in DC in the 50s and 60s was really a pretty cool town. It's a very small town, but very Southern in its beliefs and its and its rules and regulations. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of difference between Washington, D.C. and Birmingham, Alabama in the 50s. I'll tell you that for sure. Yeah. Tell you stories all day long about that. Yes, sir.
I bet ya. And Jenny, real quick, I love how you talk about enjoying being around people who are different from you, because it really helps you to tap into who you are and also to see where you end and another begins. I don't know if you want to speak to that real quick, and then we'll get back to Chelle.
Sure. And I am thinking of Chelle when I'm sharing, because Chelle, you were sharing the experience of being new and going into a new group. And the need to belong is the greatest need that we have going into a new team, a new organization. And what happens in the beginning is that we are so looking to be approved, just to be getting the response that I'm good enough, and what I am and what I bring is good enough. And what happens along the way is that we start, in the beginning we're a bit uptight, and we maybe show what other people we think they want to see. And then along the way, we start letting go, and we start showing color. And we recognize that, well, my opinion is important to me, and I do want to share who I am, and I do want to, and sometimes I do come in late, and I am human. And that's when all the fun conflict starts, because we start to show color, and we start to experience that, the honeymoon is over, and we are vastly different people that get to listen and get along. And this is my experience, Linda, that the more I recognize that the people that I know that are vastly different from me, they show me a side of myself that I have yet to explore, because I do have everything inside of myself. I am not only introverted, I have extroverted parts, and I get to explore those and learn from the people around me. And it's a beautiful process once you recognize that the conflict is an opportunity for us to reflect and self-reflect and know ourselves and connect on an even deeper level. Because on that level, when we have shown color, like you were sharing, Chelle, and are accepted and are known for who we are, that's true connection. And there's so much flow and joy in our work that's coming from that space. Thank you, Linda.
All right. What's coming up for you now, Chelle? Can't wait to hear from you again.
So many things. Thank you for asking. So I'm going to start with the thing that's freshest right now. Jenny, who said something that really stuck out to me about the fun conflict. That's when the fun conflict begins, or at least that's what I heard you say. Maybe I misheard that, but conflict doesn't have to be, you're right. Conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like, it has that negative connotation already, the word con, if we were going to break it down. But if we're open and listening and willing to explore what that butting of heads is, what that initial conflict is, then we can really learn about ourselves and find that deeper connection to ourselves, but also to the rest of the group. And so I recognize that for myself in the past, I would have considered myself like more on the passive side of conflict. I would do anything to avoid it and appease people. And now I challenge myself, and I recognize that, like, if I just approach it head on, not in a reactive or combative way, but to just kind of like, all right, let's explore this. What's really at the core of this here, and how can we move past it? Then it forms a deeper connection and a deeper belonging, if you will. And that's on the inside, but that's also on the outside. And so when it can translate across both, that is where the fun conflict happens. So whether I misheard what you said, Jenny, or whatever, whether that's actually what you said, that's how I internalized it and absorbed it. The other thing that was coming up for me, something that Terry and John touched on a little bit, especially growing up in like a city. And so I grew up in a suburb in New Jersey, but then I also spent a lot of time living in New York City. And it's kind of like the melting pot. Like people, that's what people think of it as. And there's so many different areas where you can just go and explore and become part of something else, or like absorb their culture and get to know other people. And to Jenny's point of you're taught that it's for everybody, that everybody can explore and become part of everybody else's world. Well, there are clear points sometimes where you're not welcome into other people's worlds. And something that I can think of that didn't happen in New York City, it happened in my childhood, as someone of a Jewish background, and I'm no longer very religious practicing. I remember that clear divide of when I was part of something and part of a Jewish community and felt like I believed what I was being taught. I enjoyed the people around me. I enjoyed learning about the culture and my religion. And then there was a very clear divide when my family could no longer be part of that, because they couldn't afford the temple dues, or like we were struggling for a little bit at the time, and they didn't want us to be part of that community congregation anymore. And it was at that moment, and I think my parents have a different view of this, of like, it was just about the money. It wasn't just about the money for me. And I, as a child, as a teenager at that point, it became very eye-opening to me that if that was a community that was all about the money, I did not want to be part of it anymore, whether they wanted me or not. And so that was at the point where I didn't want to be part of it anymore, and I didn't need to belong or feel needed by them. I was kind of going to do my own thing. And so, to what everybody has said about that need to belong and putting people first, I'm going to do it for you as much as you're going to do it for me, and vice versa. So there comes a time when, yes, you do crave that community and belonging, and you want to be liked and feel like you have a place to go that is your own and is welcoming to you. But there's also a time that you have to make a choice and decide, do they really want me, or is it something else that they're after? And it became very clear when it became about the money that they were not for me and I was not for them. And I didn't need that in order to feel good about who I am. Which, again, I know my parents can talk about it from a different approach, and they still don't really understand why I am less religious now. And I don't see that they didn't see that same divide the way that I did. And that's okay. They're entitled to have their religion and beliefs and do what they feel is right for them. But it was at that moment that I had a very clear disconnect from why I was practicing what I was doing.
Wow.
Yeah, very powerful.
I heard that story, Chelle. Thank you. That was perfect. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's heavy duty. Yeah. Right? Society, religion, there's just so many ways that we can experience the non-inclusion piece in our lives. And it's still a choice. It's up to us, how we respond to it. We can react or we can respond. And then how do we choose to respond? So like John, he just responded by doing the opposite. So very cool. I love it. Thank you.
What a conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, listening in on this, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we have. Amazing. We'll do a little bit of final thoughts here. And I'm going to hang on to Chelle for the last of it and pass this over to Jenny for some final thoughts about today's discussion. Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, as Chelle is sharing, and I can hear myself, so will you mute Terry and Linda?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I remember a time when I outsourced my sense of worth more. And I remember feeling like I wanted to change myself in order to fit into what other people seem to expect of me. And this brought on such distress And I know that healing has meant that what I get to do is be me. I get to be authentic. I get to be real. I get to explore who I am and share myself boldly and generously with the world. And people who are also looking for me will then find me. And the people that I have around me, the amazing support system that Chelle is such a beautiful part of today, I mean, they would not have found me had I not showed up, had I not been real and trusted that, that it would come, trusted the flow of life, that I get to be me and share myself, and people will find me. And I also spot that in other people, when they are being real. And it's so powerful when we are truly ourselves, and in granting ourselves that freedom and that permission, we share to others that they are able to as well. So that's my final thought on the topic. Thank you, Terry.
Very nice. John, coming on in.
Yeah, it's for me, the concepts of belonging, inclusion, connection, engagement, the commonality there is emotion. And to me, the willingness to be honest about my emotion and my willingness to connect with you on an emotional level, understanding what your needs are, not just what my needs are. In the Daily Six, I used I came up with the definition of love. I don't even know where or how it showed up. It just showed up, which was understanding the needs of others and treating those needs as important as if they were my own. That's how I defined love. And that works whether it's a coworker, a boss, a subordinate, a friend, a spouse, a child. If my interest is in their needs as well as my own, not more than my own and not less than my own, but as important as my own, the connection becomes stronger and the sense of belonging becomes deeper. And so for me, it's been a matter of stop leading with intellectual thoughts and processes and start at least melding that with a sense of emotional connection, not just an intellect.
And Chelle, your story is the opposite of John's, because you were people pleasing and loving on others more than you loved yourself. So your book title is Loving Yourself Isn't Selfish. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book and any final thoughts that you have and where we can find you out online?
Yeah, that's a loaded question because there's so much there. I'll try to keep it brief. Yeah, loving yourself isn't selfish. And that's something that I've really had to dive into and explore for myself the last few years, even beyond writing the book. As John was saying, love means that my needs are just like I'm putting your needs at the same level as mine, not more or less than. And that's something that I didn't often do, was I put my needs below others because I was seeking that I had that need to belong. I was seeking that validation and the acceptance and the understanding of others. And I didn't fully appreciate and understand and love myself first. And so it's that learning of how to do that really, like, I think there's another layer of loving yourself isn't selfish. And I'm really excited to explore that, whether that's in another book, as I know I've like kind of touched on a little bit with you, Linda. Yeah, I think there's like a remix of sorts that needs to happen, because I've learned so much about myself and how to love myself and appreciate that is not removed from other people. It comes because I can explore both now in the same frame. And it's not selfish. It's not selfless. I'm not a martyr. And I don't want others to expect that of me, because I don't expect that of myself. So when I recognize it, there's that line of as Jenny says, knowing where one ends and the other begins. And now it's that fusion of selfless and selfishness. And I'm like, I'm playing around in that right now, and it feels really good. So thank you for having this need to belong conversation with me. It's really powerful.
Talk about doing some advertising on there. We have the Daily Six. We have Chelle's book and a hint at a new book. Did you pick that up, ladies and gentlemen?
Right. And Jenny's got Choosing
And Jenny's got two.
Choosing Unity.
Just a bunch of books around
Jen's
here.
got more than
That's
two.
not too bad. Right. And we're talking about People Come First, the book live. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Chelle, for being our guest this week. Just love you to death. Big fan. And ladies and gentlemen, leave your comments below. We'll be looking for them. And thanks for coming.